lesson 237 that we will be following in class. If you're on YouTube, if you go in the description underneath this video, you can click on a link there as well. All right, a lot of ground to cover. Let's get right into the introduction. Point number one. It has been an eventful summer to say the least. Since we last met for this class on Sunday, May 26, much has transpired. My co-authored book with Dave Reed, The Myth of Verbatim Identicality, How God Actually Preserved His Word, along with the contents of this class, previous lessons, have been subject to scorn and ridicule in certain quarters of the internet. So we've been under fire this summer from some people who have taken exception with what we've been teaching in this class. They don't like it because it differs from the mainline King James only defense. And I've been upfront with you guys about this from the beginning, that I have issues, not with the King James Bible, not with advocacy for use of the King James Bible alone, but with some of the ways some people have sought to defend it. And so we've been talking about those things as we worked our way through this material. That said, I remain undeterred in both conviction and resolve to press forward with the work that we've been doing in this class. Nothing that has been said in my mind has even come close to number one, accurately representing what the book teaches, what I actually believe, or refuting it with any measure of depth. It's all been subterfuge and straw manning and all sorts of other things. In May, before taking a break for the summer, we finished our look at the 1629 Cambridge edition, and we looked at this in lesson 233, 235, and 236. As we resume class this fall, I would like to resume our assessment of the printed history of the King James text by looking at what transpired during the decade of the 1630s between the Cambridge editions of 1629 and 1638. So the two main Cambridge editions are the 1629 and the 1638. We want to look at what happened in between those two editions today in class. Originally, I planned to resume by looking at the 1638 Cambridge folio edition, but some unforeseen circumstances have convinced me that a different course of action was in order. So I've this was not what I was originally planning on doing, but I've sort of re-diverted my focus because of some things that have happened, So let me give you some background and context here briefly, So on Sunday, May 19, 2024, I taught lesson 235 on the 1629 Cambridge edition. During this lesson, I used Job 4:6 as an example of editorial change in the printed history of the King James text. Shortly thereafter, Dave Reed and I received a text message from somebody asking for an example of an editorial change in the King James Bible. This was a quote of their message. Can you give me an example of a variation in the text of the King James Bible that was an intentional editorial change of wording, not purposely to purposely create a new reading, not correction of printing mistake or unintentional variation, new mistake, with evidence that proves why the change was made? So that was the question that we were posed with late in May. In response, we prepared a document, that would be Dave Reed and I, titled Job 4:6 as an example of an editorial change, as a private response to the question. We never intended that document to get published online. It was our private response to a private question that we received. Unfortunately, it made its way to the public space, So, on Tuesday, June 25, 2024, our private response was made public on the Hope Bible Church YouTube page with a video titled, What About Variations in the King James Bible? Answering Bryan Ross, Q&A 288. On Tuesday, August 20, so this is more recent, 2024, it was revealed that our private response had been sent to Gail Ripplinger for analysis. And that was made public in a video titled, Ripplinger Refutes Ross, Is Job 4:6 an example of an editorial change in the King James Bible? Q&A 296. In response to our document that was never intended for public consumption, Gail Ripplinger wrote a piece titled, Bryan Ross's Lying Dross. Bryan Ross's Lying Dross. How many of you guys remember the 1980s, growing up with Garbage Pail Kids, trading cards? How many of you guys remember these? AJ, you remember these? So like there was these cards, and they were all like a play on somebody's name, So like Lion Bryan, Brainy Bryan, Magnificent Mike, or something like that, right? And so you can do puns on names. That's amazing. Bryan Ross's Lying Dross, View 2, a critique on his article entitled Job 4:6 as an example of editorial change. On Thursday, August 29, I responded to the charge that I had lied about Job 4:6 in the 1629 Cambridge Bible in a video titled, "Did I Lie About Job 4:6 in the 1629 Cambridge Edition Response to Ripplinger?" I demonstrated clearly that there had been two different Cambridge printings in 1629, okay? One containing the word "this" in Job 4:6 and one omitting it. So here's the first image, okay? I've stacked them on top of each other. Here's the top one. Is not thy fear. Here's another one. Is not this thy what? Fear. Both of these, I proved in the prior video that both of these printings both date from 1629, okay? So I was not lying when I said that I was looking at a 1629 that did not have the word "this" in it, because I demonstrated clearly that this is a 1629 Cambridge Bible, and that one had the word "this" in it and the other one did not. Okay? Is everybody with that so far? So I demonstrated, based upon the information provided in her PDF, Gail Ripplinger could not prove that hers was, quote, the official 1629 Cambridge any more than David Norton could prove his position. So David Norton is saying Gail thought that this is the official, the one on the bottom is the official. David Norton thought it was the one on the top. Okay? So when I taught the class in May where we were talking about Job 4:6, this was the one I was using when I was talking about this. At the time, not aware of this one being in existence. Okay? Is everybody following that? I also quoted and cited Gordon Campbell on the matter, as well as F.H.A. Scrivener indirectly through Norton. See page 663 of Norton's A Textual History of the King James Bible. Okay? So I'm getting you caught up for background for why I'm talking about this. All right? Regardless of which edition of the 1629 was, quote, the official Cambridge edition, a change did occur in the text regarding the word "this." The word "this" was italicized in 1629 when it had not been italicized in 1611 or 1616. So let's look at that. Here's a screenshot of the 1611. Is not this thy fear? Now, notice this is black letter font. You see how is in different font than the rest of these letters. So the way they did italics in the 1611 was to use Roman font to indicate italics in a text that was set using black letter type. Does that make sense? So you'll see, is the word "this" here, but is it in italics? No. Okay, go to the next page. 1616. Again, is not this thy fear? Is this in italics in 1616? No. Now we get to the 1629 and notice, is not this thy fear? Is this in italics? So is there a change with regarding the word "this" in the 1629 Cambridge text? Yes, it is italicized. Page 3. As will be demonstrated, this change, italicizing the word "this," was not picked up in London editions dating from the 1630s. So here's what you need to get from that, okay? Cambridge makes this change to italics in 1629. 1629. London printings that continue to be printed throughout the 1630s, they don't adopt this revision. They keep it the same. They keep the word "this," but it's not in what? Italics. And I'll show you that without a beyond doubt here shortly. Okay? So, last spring, when I taught lesson 235, I was not aware of the two different Cambridge printings of the 1629 text. So consider the following potential options. So I'm going to put those two images stacked back on the screen. Okay? So here's two options regarding the one that's printed, "Is not thy fear," versus "Is not this thy fear," with the "this" being in italics. Option 1. The edition omitting "this" was the first printing. The omission was deemed a mistake, so the text was reset and printed again, correcting "this" in italics. So the first option is that this was the first printing, and they realized that they what? Missed it. And so then they made a second printing in 1629 where they what? Put it in. That's one option. Is everybody following that option? Yes? No? Maybe so? Okay. Option 2. The edition containing this was the first printing. So this could have been the first printing, the one containing the word this in italics, okay? Lost my spot. Later, a second edition was typeset and accidentally omitted what? The word. So are either one of those, at this point, viable options? Okay? So since the release of my video on August 29, I have been thinking about how one could determine which 1629 represents the text Cambridge intended. So which one of those is the intended text? Okay, and how could we know what Cambridge intended to do? That was my sort of question, follow-up question as I was thinking through all of this, okay? So I believe the key to this is to look at subsequent printings of the 1629 Cambridge text between 1629 and 1638 when the text was edited a second time by Cambridge University. So it seems to me the way to resolve this issue is to look at, well, what did they do next? Okay, how did they print the text in 1630, in 1631, in 1635? Are they printing the text omitting the word this, or are they printing the text containing the word this in italics? Okay, now let's stop there. Anybody got any questions or comments?
So is it fair to say that the word this should never have been in italics to begin with, but if it was the second option, perhaps it became an oops, this is, we just stuck it in there and we missed it.
No.
Bad. No.
I think the intention is to include the word, the intention is to include this and italicize it.
Really?
Because there is no underlying Hebrew word for this in this verse. Okay? But prior printings
Had it in there prominently.
had it in there, but, whoops, I went too far. Prior printings had it in there, like here's the 1611, and it's not what? Italicized. And here's 1616, it's not italicized. And now here it is in 1629 in one Cambridge printing with it italicized. So what we're going to see, I believe, is that they intended, number one, they intended for the word this to be there. And number two, they make an intentional change to the word this by putting it into italics. Does that make sense? Any questions?
How does that change any context?
It doesn't. It doesn't change the meaning of the verse other than the English being transparent to the reader that there's no Hebrew word for this. So in other words, is this a word, no pun intended, that the translators inserted in English to have it make sense in English? You following that? Any questions?
Isn't that what translation is? You do make those kind of adjustments.
Of course you do, Bart. Yes. But, okay, hold that thought. Maybe we'll come back to that, okay? So, this line of thought led me to investigate the state of the text in the 1630s before the second Cambridge Folio edition of 1638. In order to cover this topic, we will consider, the following points. So the first point we're going to look at is Cambridge printings of the 1629 text in the 1630s. Does that make sense? So they print the text in 1629. How do they publish the text in the 1630s? Second, I want to look at the London printings in the 1630s. Then we have a conclusion. And then there's a long appendix at the end of the lesson that gives a historical development of Job 4:6 in the Textus Receptus King James tradition, tracing the reading from Coverdale to the 1638 Cambridge Folio edition. Probably not going to cover that. That's just there for your edification if you want to check that out. So before we move on then into our first point on the next page, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, so page 4. Cambridge printings of the 1629 text in the 1630s. So for each of the following examples, we will provide a screenshot of the entry in A.S. Herbert's Historical Catalog of Printed Editions. That is this book right here, okay? This book right here is A.S. Herbert's Historical Catalog. This catalogs printed editions of the English Bible from 1525 to 1961. You can see how big it is. It's got a ton of information and data in here as they have sought to create a catalog of all the printings of the English Bible from 1525 all the way to 1961. Okay? So the first thing you're going to see here is a screenshot from Herbert's catalog. Okay? Then you're going to have a dated title page from the edition that we're talking about. You're going to have a screenshot of Job 4:6 and then possibly some commentary where appropriate. So, according to Herbert's catalog, the 1629 Cambridge text was reprinted in 1630 by the University Press in quarto size in both Roman and black letter font. So let's look at this. Everybody check this out. So here's the entry, 1630. Okay? This was a publication at Cambridge. The printers are Thomas and John Buck. And you can see it is a quarto size, thus the 4 here. Okay? When it says down here, well, this is one entry. So this is saying this. So this one is in black letter. This in the black letter, I'm sorry, this one's in Roman. This in the black letter issue of the same year are the first quarto editions of the King James Version printed at Cambridge. Okay? So this is Cambridge University Press printing the text again in 1630 in a quarto size. That is a different size. The folio was the big size, the quarto size is the smaller size, and they reprinted 2 different times in 1630, both in quarto size, one in black letter font and one in Roman font. Does that make sense? Okay? That's what this information here is showing you from Herbert's catalog. So here's the top one. This is in Roman font, and then here is the second one, entry 433, quarto in black letter font, Cambridge University. So Cambridge University prints the text twice in 1630 in quarto size, in Roman as well as black letter font. So go to the next page. So let's look first at the Roman font. So this is the 1630 Cambridge quarto in Roman font, and the H432 is giving you the catalog number in Herbert's catalog. That's what that is, just so you know. Okay? Now look at this. This is the title page from the New Testament. It's clearly dated what year? 1630. Okay? Now notice, here is the representation of Job 4:6. Notice, is not this thy fear, comma, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways? Now, some of you are already spinning wheels on this, okay? So look at my notes here, okay? Note that while this edition contains this, so does it have this in it?
Yeah.
And is it in italics?
Yeah.
Yes. Note that while this edition contains this, it still exhibits additional changes to what we observed in the 1629 folio, okay? So pay careful attention. Notice, so this is 1630. Notice where they have thy hope. Where is it in the verse? The beginning, the middle, or the end?
The middle.
The middle. Let's go back up here. (1629). So the year before, in folio, is not this thy fear, thy confidence, and the uprightness of thy ways, thy what?
Oh.
So in the very next year, in a smaller edition, do they relocate the clause, thy hope, from the end of the verse to the middle of the verse? Does everybody see that? We see that or we don't? Okay, good. So note that while this edition contains this, it still exhibits additional changes to what we observed in the 1629 folio editions. There's another change, okay? There was a semicolon after confidence that now in 1630 becomes a comma, okay? So a comma after confidence instead of a semicolon in thy hope is relocated from the end of the verse to the middle. I just showed you that, right? Now, so let's go to the next page. Now consider the following screenshot of Job 4:6 from the 1638 Cambridge folio edition. So here's the 1630 now, and notice, is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways? Does it match the 1630 quarto? Shake your head yes, because it matches. So this means then that after Cambridge printed their major folio edition in 1629, were they still making changes to this verse in minor editions in 1630?
Why didn't they put a semicolon after hope in this one? Because it seems like, isn't a semicolon like a slight change in thought, or, I mean, it was all adverbs.
So,
fear, confidence, hope, and then the statement, the uprightness of thy ways.
Punctuation preferences. So here's the 1630. Okay, comma, comma, comma. Right?
Yeah.
Here's the 1638. Comma, comma, comma. If we go back up to 1629, comma, semicolon, comma here. Okay? So are they clearly making editorial changes to this verse?
Oh, yeah.
They're relocating this clause, and are they repunctuating the verse? Okay, now understand though that you cannot miss this. This is a major point, okay? They are doing this though, not in the 1629 Cambridge. They are doing this in a 1630 quarto. Okay? A quarto is considered to be a minor edition, not a major edition. But are they still making these kind of changes even in their smaller editions as Cambridge is printing the text? Okay? And then the change that they make in 1630, they adopt into the 1638 the same way they did in 1630. Okay? Yeah.
Is that change though made because of something in the Hebrew that they're saying that it justifies this for thought?
So my understanding is that Job 4:6 is a little bit of an awkward verse. Okay? And it depends on how you want to go about translating it. Do you want to just literally like transliterate the words into English? Or do you want to have it be more of flowing? Do you want it to flow better in English? Okay? And so my understanding is that the King James translators, when they originally worked on this verse, they were more interested in capturing the actual word order or literally putting it into English, even if it didn't necessarily make for good English. And then what's happening later on is that they're redoing the verse so that it reads better in English. But has the substance of the verse changed?
No.
The substance of the verse has not changed. Okay? So is it verbatim identical?
No.
No. Is there verbal equivalence?
Yes.
Yes. Okay?
Well,
Right?
it definitely is bringing it into a way we speak more now today.
Yeah.
You know, if we list a whole bunch of things, you usually just list, comma, and
Yeah.
at the end, rather than say and then add another one after it.
Right. So my understanding is they're more, in 1611, they were more sort of wooden or literal in how they were doing this. Okay? Because there's a little bit of, my understanding, this is a little bit of a hard verse to translate. Okay? But notice that the 1638 folio matches the 1630 quarto. Is everybody following that?
So the change was made and it was cleaned up. That's how they saw it.
So Cambridge made the change, not in they made part of the change, okay? Well, let's look at it. Did they change this to italics in 1629? Yes, but did they leave thy hope dangling out here at the end in 1629? Now in 1630, they take thy hope and they remove it from the end. They don't remove it, they move it from the end to where? The middle. To make for a better English what? Sentence. Okay? Is everybody following this? So, let's look at some more data. So now let's look at a 1630 quarto in black letter. Okay, so this is the same year. Notice again, what's the date on this? 1630. So now we have the black letter edition from the same year. And notice, is not this, these are in Roman font, that's equal to italics in a black letter. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways? So do they do it the same way in the 1630 black letter quarto that they did in the 1630 Roman font what? See you guys, so this, you see how this gets confusing real fast if you're not being careful, okay? So, what can we say about this then? The 1630 Cambridge black letter quarto matches the Roman font quarto of the same year. This is in italics, i.e. Roman font in the black letter, regular italics in the Roman font. The comma after confidence instead of a semicolon, and thy hope is relocated from the end of the verse to the middle. Okay? So here's sort of, is it reasonable to assume that the King James translators were present every time Cambridge editors reset and printed the text? Is that a reasonable assumption?
No.
I say that is not a reasonable assumption. So that means are Cambridge editors changing this text? Okay, so even if you want to say, as some do, that they were present in 1629, when Cambridge did its first big folio edition, the problem you have with that is are now changes being made the following year in 1630 when they're printing a smaller edition. And those changes that are made in 1630, are those becoming now the standard readings? Okay, yeah.
I think also if they were, let's just say they were there, let's make the assumption that those translators were there for every single one. That even more solidifies the whole point of the change. In other words, they're saying, yep, that cleans it up. So whether it is or isn't, it's almost a moot point.
Right. So what the way people want to argue, though, is this, AJ. They want to say, well, the 1638, the 1629, and the 1616 are official translational edits.
Because those people were still alive?
Because they were still alive and they were there. Okay? That's what folks say. My point is, that's not going to work because they're making changes when they're printing minor editions in the intermittent years. Okay? So it's not reasonable to assume that these translators had like nothing better to do for the rest of their life than to stand in the print shop of a printer and make sure that they were printing the text the way they thought it should be printed.
And after printing something that voluminous, I would think their next statement would be, I'm going to Disneyland. Because that had to have taken up every minute of their day.
Yeah. So,
Well, positing that they were there, let's assume, like AJ said, they were there for every change that ever took place. The only way that holds weight is if we believe the double inspiration, that they were somehow inspired by God, and so every change they're making is, God inspired. But the problem is, if He inspired them in 1611, why do we got to keep edition?
exactly. Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly right. Okay. Now, let's keep going because it gets more interesting. Trust me. Okay. So, let's look now at the 1631 Cambridge Quarto Black Letter. All right. So here we have the entry from Herbert's catalog. So we're talking about entry 438. This is again a Cambridge printing by Thomas and John Buck. This is a quarto edition, and it's in what font? Black letter. Okay, so let's look at this. Here's a, whoa, went way too fast. Here's a dated title page. Cambridge, what year? 1631, and notice what the text says. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways? So is it matching exactly what they published in the quarto edition of the previous year? Okay, let's look at the next one. We can start moving a little quicker. 1633, Cambridge quarto in black letter font, H474. So here's 474 in Herbert's catalog. Again, Thomas and John Buck, Cambridge University, quarto size, black letter font. Notice what we have here. We have a dated title page to what year? 1633, and notice how the verse reads. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways? Does it match 31? Does it match 30? It's not the greatest. The clarity on this scan was not as great, but
Better than it is on the page.
yeah. 1637. Cambridge quarto in Roman font, H513. Here's the entry for 513. This is done now by Buck and Daniel at Cambridge University. This is again a quarto, and this one's in Roman font. Let's look at the date here. What's the date on this? 1637. And then how does the verse read? Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways? So once Cambridge established the reading in 1630, do they run it that way in all the minor editions throughout the 1630s? Okay? Now, if only things were that neat and tidy all the time, here's 1637 black letter font. Again, this is H514. So again, printers of the University of Cambridge. It's a quarto size, black letter. Here's the title page. What year is it date from? 1637. And then notice it is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways. Everything's hunky-dory. Well, let's talk about a 1629 Cambridge folio. Now this is important. So we're on page 12. Okay, so here is what I want you to see. First of all, does this clearly date 1629?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, look at the next page. Here's the title page from the whole Bible. And notice what it says. So it says printed by Thomas Buck, and then it says Roger Daniel, printers of the University of Cambridge. Okay, so let me make sure you understand what's going on here. The New Testament title page in this edition is clearly dated what? 1629. However, the title page at the beginning says that Thomas Buck and Roger Daniel are the printers at the University of Cambridge. Does everybody see that? The photographic evidence. Okay? The 1629 Cambridge folio notes Roger Daniel along with Thomas Buck on the title page. According to the Cambridge University Press website, Roger Daniel did not become a printer at Cambridge until 1632. Here's a screenshot from the Cambridge University Press website. Okay, notice what it says. The following dates will help you find an approximate date for the printing of your Bible. The university printer and addresses are often mentioned on the pages of the Bible that give approximate details. Now look at this. Thomas, or who are we looking for? Roger Daniel, right? Notice, Roger Daniel, when did he become a printer? 1632 until when? 1650. So understand what this is. This is a 1629 folio published in the middle of the 1630s once Roger Daniel becomes the printer. So it's a reprint in 1635. Why do I say that? Here's why. Look at the next point. Therefore, this 1629 folio edition under consideration was not printed until Roger Daniel became university printer between 1632 and 1638 when the second Cambridge folio edition was printed. There is an essay, volume 8, number 4 of the journal Transactions of the Cambridge Bibliographic Society. Sounds like a great thing to read a lot of. That mentions the 1629 edition in question. B.J. McMullen explains, quote, the 1629 folio correlates, or collates, and then it gives, that's all fancy for the page, okay, and is an engraved title leaf, undated, bearing the names Thomas and John Buck. So is that exactly, I read that wrong. Yeah, that's what it should say, Thomas and John Buck, so bear with me. McMillan provides a list of 39 exemplars of the 1629 Cambridge Bible. Number 2 on the list is at Peterborough Cathedral Library. There is a footnote that leads you back to the 8th endnote, which states, deposited in the University Library, Cambridge, apparently a reissue assigned by the revised STC, that's a code for the publication, right? Now watch, with the imprint altered to read Thomas Buck and Roger what? Is that exactly what we're looking at right there? It's exactly what we're looking at right there. So this is a reissue later of a 1629 after Roger Daniel becomes the printer at the Cambridge University Press. Based on this, I would say the 1629 folio under consideration is a 1635 Cambridge printing, and I have to give a shout out to Alex for his assistance with locating some of that information, okay? Now, here's the deal. Herbert's catalog, so underneath that point, Herbert's catalog does not include a list, it should say a listing, for a 1629 folio edition dating from the time of Roger Daniel. Here's how this edition reads, okay? So if you look at this one from 1635, this reprint, notice how it reads. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, semicolon, and the uprightness of thy ways, comma, thy what? So what does this mean?
It's a reprint.
It's a reprint. So in the 1630s, is Cambridge University Press printing the text with exact identicality? They are not. Okay? Let me just finish this point, I'll take any questions. This Cambridge printing retains the old configuration of Job 4:6, with thy hope at the end of the verse, while other Cambridge printings in the 1630s move the clause to the middle of the verse. I've proved that to you from the images I presented to you in this lesson. Okay? This means that the Cambridge printers were unevenly printing the text of Job 4:6 between 1630 and 1638 across the various sized editions. David Norton's annotated list of Bibles cataloged in his bibliography on pages 362 through 364 does not list any of the Cambridge Quarto editions published between 1630 and 1638. So here is page 363 from Norton. Notice he's got the 1629 folio Cambridge. He notes that there are two of them, like I've already showed you. Okay? Then notice where he goes. He goes next to a 1629 quarto from London. That's the King's printer in London. That's different from Cambridge. He jumps to a 1629 octavo size, also printed in London, not Cambridge. And then when he goes to 1630, notice he references two 1630 quartos from London. He does not reference another Cambridge printing until he gets to 1638. So my point is this: is he missing all of the quarto-sized publications of the Cambridge University Press during the 1630s in his analysis? So when he looks at it, he looks now at the 1638 folio of Cambridge, and he's like, that's when they moved thy hope from the end of the verse to where? The middle, but that's not true, because did they do it in 1630? But see, if you're looking at these, and you're not looking at the Cambridge printings, they're not reading the same. Okay? So, let me finish this point. Rather, Norton limited himself to the 1629 and 1638 Cambridge folio editions. Therefore, Norton cataloged the standard reading of Job 4:6 as dating from the 1638 folio edition, when the reading first appeared in 1630. Okay? Now, does that make sense? I understand, guys, this is technical, and I don't want your eyes to glaze over behind your eyeballs. But this is important stuff. So what ends up happening, okay, so somebody wrote a piece and made a video about me criticizing me. Okay? No problem. We'll just do the work to figure out what's really going on. Okay? And when you do the work to figure out what's really going on, what you realize is the truth is far more interesting than what somebody wants to say at the surface, including David Norton in this case. Okay?
Please tell me Gale has a reprint.
Huh?
I said, please tell me Gale's was the reprint.
Hers was either the reprint or the original, but she doesn't prove it based on the evidence she provides in her PDF. She doesn't even come close to proving it.
Did she have a title page?
She had a title page dated 1629.
Right. What did it say? The printers in there though?
It said the printers were Thomas and John Buck, not Roger Daniel. Yeah.
When I was working with Bible Doctrines, we went to the Scriptorum over in Holland, which has now been moved to, I think, the Bible Museum in, I don't know if that's Florida or Tennessee. And the person who took us through, one of the things they stated, and I would ask if this would be a possibility, the printers often, when they were doing reprints, literally went into their catalog or their library of the already typeset pages. So they literally had thousands and thousands of these things, which is why at some point the oldest got tossed away, and this may have been one of those times where they said, we're going to reprint the folio for whatever purpose. Maybe it was more desired, it was just requested, whatever. They took what was there without even looking at it, without updating it, and just slapped it on and let it go.
Yeah, I think that's probably exactly what happened. They probably had leftover leaves of a 1629 laying around that never got used or bound, and so they probably just grabbed them and used them.
Or the typeset was still there in that
That's
form.
probably not the case, because
No.
the reason I don't think that's the case is then that means they would literally have to maintain trays and trays and trays of standing type for a whole page, for every page in every size in each font type for the whole Bible. You are talking about needing to have an enormous amount of typeface and warehouses to store all this in. So I think what is more likely, when they reprint in 1635 the folio from 1629, they probably had pages laying around that they wanted to use up from a previous one, and so they just grabbed those and used those. But the point is, even Bibles rolling off the Cambridge University Press in the 1630s, are they unevenly printing the text? Okay? Yeah. Okay, any other quick questions before we get to the next point? So Nate, back to your point. Probably the intended printing in 1629 was to include the word "this" in italics. But based on the evidence that Gail Ripplinger presented in her document, she doesn't even come close to proving that. What I'm saying is, if you really want to know, you have to look at the subsequent printings after that to see what they did. And all of the subsequent printings in quarto size, in black letter and Roman type, did they all italicize the word "this." But that's not the only thing they did. They also took "thy hope" and they moved it from the end and put it where? In the middle. And did they repunctuate the verse? So are they doing further editorial work to the text than what was done in 1629?
And on Gail's position, that's not permissible.
Correct. It's not permissible. So now let's look at the London printings. So before we do this, just briefly, okay? Does everybody understand the point I'm making about Norton? He goes from, notice his bibliography. He goes from 1629, oops, let me get the right one. Here it is. He goes from a 1629 folio Cambridge, and the next time he looks at another Cambridge one is down here in 1638. In the intermittent time, he's only looking at London, 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 London until he gets to where? The Cambridge 38. So he's not observing what's going on in every single one of the Cambridge printings. My objective is using the internet to be able to find every single printing and have them, every single one of them, in a Dropbox file, cataloged to Herbert's catalog number. But these are the things I think about, so. I know you're all just like, wow, that's awesome. All right, whoops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so let's look now at London. I think we have enough time to do this. So 1630, London printings in the 1630s. So the first one we're going to look at here is one that Norton looked at. Okay? 1630 London quarto black letter H430. So here's 1630. Where's this being printed at? London. It's in quarto size. What font? Black letter. Okay? So let's look at the title page. Notice this one's in Roman numerals, but I did make sure. So imprinted where? London by Robert Barker and John Bill, printers to the King's Most Excellent Majesty, and in Roman numerals this works out to 1630. Okay? And here's what it says. Notice. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, the uprightness of thy ways? Notice, and thy what? Hope. This is not in italics, and has not been moved yet, and thy hope has not been what? Moved yet. Okay, so look at the notes underneath that. This London text does not reflect the changes made at Cambridge in 1629 and 1630. This is not italicized and has not been relocated to before the uprightness of thy ways, and thy hope is still at the end of the verse instead of being relocated to the middle of the verse. Does everybody see that? The rest of the London printings in the 1630s agree with this edition depicted above against the Cambridge editions in the same decade. So let's look at the next one, which is a 1630 London quarto in Roman font. So here we have 1630. Again, we got Robert Barker. It's being printed at London. It's in quarto size. It's in Roman font. Here's the title page again, imprinted at London, 1630. Notice what it says. It says, "Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, the uprightness of thy ways, and thy hope?" This is not in italics, and is still at the end of the verse, not relocated before the uprightness of thy ways, and thy hope is still at the end of the verse, not relocated to the middle.
So they do something else though, because in the Cambridge printing, the "and" is at the uprightness of thy way.
Right. That's where it was
In the 1611.
in the 1611.
But then Cambridge put it in front of uprightness of
Cambridge in 1629 moved "and"
Right.
to in front of "and the uprightness of thy ways." So the London printings don't match in the italics in this. They don't match in the location of "and," they don't match in the location of "thy hope," and they don't match in the punctuation after "confidence." But you got to have everything in the exact words in the exact order.
Right. Correct.
Okay? If you don't, then you're in trouble, according to the reasoning of some. Okay? 1635 London quarto in Roman font. So this is again, this is coming from London. This actually is not a quarto. I don't remember what they call the size in 12. Do you remember, Mike?
No.
It's not an octavo. I can't remember. We're not going to spend much time worrying about it right now. Okay, what I want you to see here, look at the title page. Printed at London by Robert Barker. What year? 1635. Look at the reading. "Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, the uprightness of thy ways, and thy hope?" So does it still read the way the other London printings are reading in the 1630s? No. Where do you see no?
Ways is spelled different, isn't it?
It is spelled different. I'm not really worried about spelling, but you are right. It is spelled different.
You can't do that, Gail said.
1637. 1637 London quarto Roman font. H517. Sorry, this is an octavo, my bad. This is an octavo, it's in 8, it's printed at London, okay? Look at the title page. Printed at London by Robert Barker, what's the year? 1637. What's the reading? "Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and thy hope," see I can't even read it, "the uprightness of thy ways and thy hope." So let me read it again because I read it correctly, not the way it's printed. "Is not this thy fear," not in italics, "thy confidence, the uprightness of thy ways, comma, and thy hope." So it's still not, so it's following all of the other London printings. Now, why does all this matter? Let's go to the conclusion. Now look, before we read the conclusion, we're only talking here about one verse.
Mostly like many.
One verse. How many, I don't know the answer off the top of my head because I do have a life to some degree, but how many of you would surmise that this would apply to more than one verse if you really spent the time to look at this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is everybody with me? Okay, look at the conclusion. So, Job 4:6 in the Cambridge printings is an example of both a printer's error and an editorial change. Okay? Why? The 1629 Cambridge text that included the word "this" in italics was the intended reading would judge by subsequent Cambridge printings throughout the 1630s. So does everybody see how I'm determining that? I'm determining that not on a whim and a wish and a prayer and a dream. I'm determining that by looking at the data, the print data from Cambridge after that point. What did they intend the text to say? Okay, so that would mean then that the one from 1629 that didn't have the word "this" in it, that would have been a printer error. They just simply what? Missed it. Okay? Beginning in 1630, Cambridge editors moved "thy hope" from the end of Job 4:6 to the middle and changed the semicolon after "confidence" to a comma. The relocation of "thy hope" was an editorial change, not the correction of a printer's error. So there's a printer's error in Job 4:6, and there's also an editorial what? Change. It's an example of both. Okay? Seeing that this change was made in 1630 and not 1629, we're talking now about the relocation of thy hope. Seeing that this change was made in 1630 and not 1629, it is questionable whether the translators were present when the change was made. Unless you're going to think they're just got nothing better to do than to hang out in the print shop of Cambridge. Okay? It does not seem reasonable to assume that the translators were present every time Cambridge University sat and print the text.
Well, that point becomes kind of even dumber when you consider, like I said, the London printing differing from Cambridge, because if they're sitting on every revision,
Correct.
major or minor, why are they making two editorial changes different?
Why are they not helping out the King's printer and only helping out Cambridge?
You just don't care about London?
Okay? So this is why, see, people hear what I'm saying and they think I'm attacking the King James. I'm not attacking anything. What I'm saying is you better have an accurate understanding of what actually happened. Because otherwise you're whistling in the wind on this. Okay? Therefore, the textual history of Job 4:6 in the Cambridge printings is an example of both a printer's error and an editorial change. That said, Cambridge did not print the text with uniformity during the period in question, 1629 to 1638. How do I know? Because they have a 1630 folio published by Buck and Roger Daniel that still has the old reading in it. So I could go to Cambridge University Press in the 1630s, and depending on which one I bought, I'd be getting a different what? I'd be getting a different text, at least in Job 4:6. Okay? Moreover, the London printings issued by the King's printer differed from those published by Cambridge. In the case of Job 4:6, discrepancies in the use of italics, punctuation, and word order existed between the London and Cambridge printings during the 1630s. Okay? And spelling, let's add that too. And spelling. Mike, can we add and spelling to this point? Third one from the bottom. Moreover.
And
So it should say, let's add the discrepancies in the use of italics, punctuation, spelling, and word order existed between the London and Cambridge printings. So understand, could you go to a bookshop in the 1630s to buy a King James Bible and be getting uneven Bibles?
Yes.
But if you're going to say that you got to have every word, every exact word in the exact order, then that means people during the 1630s were buying legitimate or illegitimate Bibles. You see where this leads to? Like, is that really where we want to go? Apparently that's where some want to go. To me, that makes absolutely no sense. Because whether this is in italics, whether you spell ways, W-A-Y-S or W-A-Y-I-E-S, or however they spelled ways, and you have thy hope at the end or in the middle, does it change the substantive doctrinal content of that verse?
No.
No. Okay? So, I am presently, so here's the real thing to figure out, right? The real thing to figure out, so I'm presently engaged in a study seeking to determine when the London printings issued by the King's printer conformed to the editions issued by Cambridge. I don't know. I'm surmising and making an educated guess. But my guess is into the 1640s, possibly the 1650s, the text is still being printed unevenly between London and Cambridge. And that doesn't even mention the fact that eventually Edinburgh starts printing the text in Scotland. So you've got all this going on. Okay? So, I'll end this. This is yet another reason why demanding verbatim identicality of wording across the printed history of the King James text is not a wise position to adopt. If that's your standard, do you have to tell me which one of these is the inerrant one?
Yeah.
To the exclusion of all of the other ones.
Yep.
I don't understand why this is a hard position for some people to grasp other than it's against their tradition, which is really probably the answer. Okay? This is yet another reason why demanding verbatim identicality of wording across the printed history of the King James text is not a wise position to adopt. In contrast, understanding the principle of verbal equivalence mitigates against, and I want to change this, mitigates against this problem. Okay? So we do have a few minutes for questions. Anybody got any comments or questions? What follows, guys, is just an appendix that lists out in photographic evidence with Herbert's catalog numbers the history of this verse starting with Coverdale in 1535 all the way through to the Cambridge edition of 1638. Okay? We don't have time to cover that, but it's just there for, you know, your edification, because I know you're going to go home tonight and be like, I just have to read this. Okay? Yeah.
I think the other thing that has to be kind of mentioned, and I think if there's any, I'm sure that any party that had an issue previously, they see this, it's stir the pot again, and I think everybody involved needs to realize we are sharpening each other. This should not be a point of contention. This should be the body of Christ helping the body of Christ gain a true perspective of this and not make this a battlefield, because we're already battling enough out in the world. We don't need to be battling each other.
I would say amen to that 100 times over, but that is not the stance that has been taken this summer towards the work that we're talking about.
But that means that those people that are taking that stance incorrectly need to settle that with God quite literally. They should be praying over these things instead of blindly accepting things. I was Catholic. I know how that goes.
I agree with you. Part of the problem in this, AJ, is, and I know this from experience, people have a vested stake because of what they've taught previously. And they're going to have to come out and say, you know what, I said X, Y, Z, it was wrong, A, B, C is true.
And walking something back like that when that's how you gain your following in the first place.
It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But that's where we have to be truth seekers, not tradition defenders. Okay? I don't know if that makes sense. But like, for somebody to convince me, think about this lesson. Somebody would have to falsify all this information. Based on what?
And why?
So you'd have to falsify what is plainly true to my own eyeballs. Say it's all fake. Say none of it's real. Okay? In the meantime, you've got the receipts in the photographic evidence, not only from Herbert's catalog, but from the title pages themselves. Like, at what point, are people just going to submit to what is factually the case? I don't know. Hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
Well, I think it gives that bad part of the testimony to the unbeliever. It says, oh, see, this is why Christianity is wrong, because they contradict each other.
Yeah. So I've got people coming onto the channel now saying that what I'm doing is, how is what I'm doing defending the King James, and that I'm undermining the final authority of the King James. I am not undermining the final authority of the King James. I am trying to set up King James defense onto a more reasonable, rational, factual basis than having to say things that don't make any sense. Or aren't true. So, next Sunday, we will continue looking at the printed history of the text by looking at the folio edition of Cambridge in 1638. And I'll have to say this, I will admit in conclusion the following. All the controversy has led me to a better understanding. Because it's forced me into the data, into the history, into the facts to try to figure out what's actually going on. Not standing back and just saying it's the way that I want it to be because I said so. Okay? All right, any other questions or comments?
Just wanted to point out, Bible Protector in the live chat said that 12 size is duodecimal.
Okay. Duodecimal?
Anybody wondering?
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, how can we stick him on to some other people?
Remember we were last term we were talking about the duodecimal. We didn't really know what it was. So
yeah, it's the result of, I just looked it up. The result of folding each printed sheet into 12 leaves.
Okay.
Or 24 pages. Each leaf is 1/12 of the size of the printed sheet, or 7 to 8 inches tall.
Yeah. All right. It's 9 o'clock, or no, 10 o'clock. If it were 9 o'clock, we'd be doing this all